Drivers have been struggling for years. All of this has fallen on deaf ears, especially through COVID, when drivers have really been in the worst of the times. Today, we are so thrilled and thankful to be standing up here with our City Comptroller, Scott Stringer, whose office has vetted our proposal. This is the Chief Financial Officer for the City of New York. These are the experts when it comes to the numbers and the budget. They have vetted our proposal and have said to us that they find our proposal to be fiscally sound. All we are calling for is for these loans to be reduced to no more than $125,000, restructured for financing over 20 years, 4% interest, which would mean a monthly mortgage of about $757. It is the only way that drivers are going to survive. It is the only way that the yellow cab industry is going to survive. What the city can do is that for loans that are restructured to $125,000 at these terms, the city would agree that if there is any default and that medallion goes up for a public auction, the city would come in and place a minimum bid to cover the balance of the $125,000 that goes unpaid. We believe that in the worst case scenario, with 6,000 loans, 5% default rate per year, which is what it's been in the worst of conditions, that even then, that you will only see a net cost to the city of $75 million over 20 years. That is a small amount for a city with a budget of $90 billion, and especially when there is an industry-specific fund that is sitting there with a surplus of over $40 million. We can get started. We cannot wait. If the city continues to wait longer, this industry is going to absolutely disappear. Thousands of families' lives are going to disintegrate. So, after a lot of darkness in a long, deep tunnel, we feel a sense of light today. We cannot thank enough to our city comptroller, who's given the time and resources to properly vet our proposal, took this seriously, and not only understood our cries for help, but understood that we have a solution that can work. And so today, it is my great honor to now be able to introduce our City Comptroller, Scott Stringer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Bayravi, thank you, everybody. Let me just talk to all of you. I want to thank you for your introduction and leadership on this issue. I have to say, you've always keep fighting, and we should give you a big round of applause for those who could hear. But today I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with a group of folks who keep our city moving and who help get New Yorkers where they need to go, and that's our taxi drivers. And I'm here with the Taxi Workers Alliance to talk about their proposal for medallion relief and why it's so important. For decades, driving a cab in New York City was a road to the middle class, especially for striving immigrants from around the world. But today, that medallion, which once promised prosperity and stability, is now a financial stinkhole. The taxi medallion crisis is a test of our commitment to fighting poverty and preserving pathways to the American dream. In the early 2000s, speculators and unscrupulous lenders distorted the price of a medallion and drove it up to a price of more than $1 million. As we know, the advent of app-based for-hire companies like Uber and Lyft further upended this market and popped the speculative bubble. So as a result, many drivers lost their homes, suffered health complications, and couldn't afford to send their children to college. They were fathers, sons, brothers, uncles. They are not here with us today, but we can be here for them. Predatory lenders took drivers for a ride and left families in a wreckage of financial distress and despair. We need to solve this problem. We have a moral obligation to the drivers to make this right. We must relieve the suffering. This breakthrough proposal from the Taxi Workers Alliance offers a responsible and necessary approach to reduce the crushing debt for drivers and prevent ballooning costs for taxpayers. My office vetted the proposal from the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, and I'm here to tell you it's financially sound. It makes sense. It makes economic sense for our city and for our drivers. And basically, this is how it works. With the collapse in the price of medallions, many owners have been left underwater, meaning their loan balances exceed the market value of their medallions. So to get a handle on this, lenders would write down outstanding loans to a maximum of $125,000, allowing medallion owners to repay loans on terms they can afford with their current earnings. This approach would give drivers manageable loan payments and free them of the threat of financial ruin. In fact, this strategy offers assurance and stability for all parties involved. We're talking drivers, lenders, and yes, taxpayers. The city would put a floor under loan losses by guaranteeing purchase of any medallions that borrowers default on, giving lenders the certainty they need about the value of their medallion loan portfolios. In the event of a default, the city would take possession of the medallion and would be able to sell it to recoup all or part of the cost. This planned sound risk management approach would limit future exposure and liability for the city. And I can tell you as controller, this plan is good for drivers and good for taxpayers. We have a responsibility to act. We cannot kick the can down the road. We cannot create more hardship. And we also have to be mindful that in this pandemic, every dollar of city money has to be looked at through managing debt responsibly and managing our risk. The existential crisis facing the yellow cab industry comes after years of hammering by Wall Street finance unregulated competitors. It's a crisis that's been made exponentially worse by this pandemic and recession. It's time to bring much needed relief to restore peace of mind. Ultimately, what this plan demonstrates and why it's so important is that it's within our power to solve this problem. We don't have to throw up our hands. We don't have to say it can't be done. We can confront this challenge head on, meet our responsibility and the moment, bring change. So I'm excited to have vetted this plan. Experts in our office vetted this plan. We asked a lot of questions of the Taxi Workers Alliance. This was not a simple process, and that's why we come here today with a very forward-thinking plan. And now I'm very honored to introduce a man who's been driving the streets of this city for 40 years. 40 years, and he's still at it. Like a lot of drivers, he's still trying to keep up with his payments. But he's here today in a spirit of cooperation and hope. So please welcome Ricardo Lopez to share his story.
Thank you, Mr. Controller. Thank you, Mr. Thank you very much. Thank you, every one of you. I really appreciate being here today. I'm Ricardo Lopez. I've been driving 40 years of my life. I'm giving all the best of my life to the city of New York, helping people on and off, back and forth. I'm an immigrant from Colombia, and I came here looking forward also for the American dream like every one of us, and I got it, finally. I thought it was my yellow cab when I bought it for $60,000 40 years ago. I paid, and I've been paying on and off, back and forth until this happens today that we are in bankruptcy, literally. If I don't get any help directly, I'm gonna go out of this business soon because I can't afford it anymore. The city is not giving any money anymore. The streets are empty. So I wish Mr. Controller help us all the way, and thank to the New York United Alliance, Working Taxi Alliance, is helping us all the way in everything that we do. Thank you, people. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
know it's getting chilly. Any questions for either one of us? Once we have the floor on the medallion sale at 125, we looked at some risk management along the way on this, and I believe, and I think you believe, that the exposure would be about 75 million.
Right.
But it could end up being a lot less. And remember, you can't just look at how much it would cost without looking at what our liability could be. We've got a lot of potential lawsuits because of the history of the city and as it relates to the taxi industry. There is exposure potentially. Let me say potentially and be very careful with my words. And part of what I'm assessing here is the 75 million may end up being a good deal for the city fiscally as well, because it would limit our exposure to many lawsuits. As you know, the Attorney General has filed a lawsuit of $800 million. So this is a way of bringing down the city exposure, but equally important, restructuring these loans so that people who drive cabs that are making these payments can actually make payments, right? So it brings them into line with what we think they can pay. Do you want to add to that at all? Or?
Yeah, I can give a little bit of more detail of how we went about this. So the risk factors that we would have to look at here are, what are really the chances that even after the loans are restructured at $125,000, that there would be default? And so therefore, if there's a default and that medallion goes back into the market, that's the only point that the city comes in here. So the city would come in and place a minimum bid on whatever is left on that $125,000. Okay? So we have to look at, number one, how many loans are we looking at? We estimated 6,000, which is the kind of the highest amount out there, highest number of loans out there. Default rate we kept at 5%, which is what it has been through these past few years during the worst of the crisis, when the balances on these loans have been close to 500, 600,000, certainly not 125,000. And we looked at, if the city does have to purchase these medallions, then what could be the market value at which they could then go ahead and resell it? So we looked at what we believe would be the lowest purchase value, which is around 75,000. And we kept it stable at 75,000 over the next 20 years. So with these worst case scenario of the highest number of loans, the highest projected rate of foreclosure, and the lowest rate of sales price, even after that, the net cost to the city would be $75 million over 20 years. And I just want to remind everybody, there is a taxi cab improvement surcharge fund, which is 30 cents collected on every trip, that goes toward the conversion of yellow cabs toward accessible vehicles, which we wholeheartedly support. Just as a point of reference, that fund has a standing surplus today of $40 million. This to us is not about the budget, but we're so thankful to have the chief financial officer of our city look at the budget and look at the numbers to say these numbers can work for everybody.
Well said. Really well said. Well said. Anybody else? Going once. Thank you all for coming out. We're going to work on this, and we thank you very much. Thank you.